So it's 7 o'clock or 6:59 and 30 seconds. Why don't we go ahead and start off? So this is the Baldwin Planning Board meeting for May 28th, 2020. We're doing the meeting virtually. It looks like we have a quorum. We are missing our secretary. Would one of the board members like to volunteer to take the minutes for tonight's meeting? You may be on mute, so you got to raise your hand. Bob's agreed to do it. So I just muted you, Dwight, just for a second. You can unmute yourself if you want, but so the first thing that I'd like to do is to review the minutes from the prior meetings. The only issue that was raised with regard to the minutes, separating out the 514 for a second, the last meeting, the prior meeting minutes, the only thing that was raised was a question whether or not sometime in the prior meetings, Nature's Wilderness through Gary Brown had indicated that there was no prior sales of the property, and that was raised by one of the board members. I reviewed, I don't want to say all of them, but I went back 3 or 4 or 5 meetings, just tried to look through quickly, and I found one reference to the question whether or not there was a sale, and it occurred in the February 27th, 2020 meeting at about 31 minutes and 5 seconds of the recording, where I posed the question to Jeff and Gary, where I said, you know, there's no plans to sell anything from the 469 acre lot, and Gary said no, it'll all be a campground. And I'm not quoting, but that's essentially what was said. I didn't know if that was the reference that you were referring to, Josiah.
I just had remembered the question being asked, and if it was asked a second time, that's okay. I just wanted it on the record once there since November when the land transfers took place.
And there may, oh, Nickel is trying to get in. I'm admitting Nickel. So I would move to, I'll wait for Nickel for just a second. Hi, Nickel.
Hi.
Bob volunteered to take the minutes. Would you like to take that back from Bob to be the secretary still?
Yeah, it seems to make sense. Thank you, though, Bob.
I don't know. When I was secretary, I just told Joe to keep doing it. I didn't care. So, Nickel, we were just talking
That's
about
how you become. That's how you become the chair, I think. With that kind of
we were talking about the review of the prior minutes, excluding the 514 minutes, and how Joe raised a question a while while we were reviewing about whether or not the issue was raised with Nature's Wilderness about selling property. I just talked about how I found the reference. I actually sent the board members an email just so they had it. So what I would like to do is to take out the 514 minutes for a second, but all the prior meeting minutes that are outstanding to have those approved, with the exception of amending the February 27th, 2020 meeting minutes to include the exchange between myself and Gary and Jeff Amos. So I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
And I'm sorry, which date are we amending? I'm just trying to type and catch up for a second. Sorry.
February 27th, 2020.
I
So
so
moved.
Second,
Second. Second.
and Nicole, you can, thank you. And Nicole, you can look at the email I sent yesterday. That
I
has
will.
the-
I'll put that language. I'll put that language in the minutes.
I appreciate it. I'm not, and I wasn't quoting, I was just getting substance. So all those
I
in
mean,
favor
the
of
minutes are
approving-
not direct quotes, so I think it's okay.
Perfect. All those in favor of approving the prior minutes with that proviso? All in favor? Seems unanimous. So the 514 minutes, was there any discussion about the 514 minutes? May 14th, 2020, the last meeting.
I move we approve them.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. It again appears to be unanimous.
Sorry,
So
who
great.
seconded them? I didn't catch that. That was Bob.
That was either Bob or Mr. Sanborn, either. So Bob has a question.
Am I voting tonight, or am I not needed to fill a quorum?
You're not needed to fill a quorum, but I'm happy to have you vote. And because, you know, if there's a need, if there's a need for further discussion, I'm more than happy to have you vote. You know, unless there's an issue, we don't count it. So the next issue on the agenda, there was four substantive issues, five total issues on the agenda. The next one was a discussion of nature's wilderness. The number four, actually, we're going to have to do first because it actually impacts the review of nature's wilderness. A question was raised during the last meeting about whether or not we are actually looking at a minor subdivision under the ordinance, because there's been 3 lots created out of the original nature's wilderness. I don't remember. What's the map and lot? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Map 7, 22.
Map 7, lot 22, 21,
22, correct.
22. Okay. So that there was that original parcel, that original property, and I think we knew this, that at some point last November, there had been a separation of the property, and it was to a relative of Mr. Efron, and apparently Nature's Wilderness spoke with the CEO and asked about there was 2 transfers, but one was to a relative of Mr. Efron, and Nature's Wilderness approached the CEO about whether or not that was a legal transfer or whether it would trigger the subdivision. And I may have some of the facts wrong, but that's essentially kind of what the gist was. And according to Nature's Wilderness, the CEO said because the person who received the property was a blood relative of Scott Efron, it wouldn't trigger the subdivision ordinance as a separation of the original mother lot into 3. At the last meeting, we had some discussion about this, and the question was, if the property is owned by an LLC, can a LLC transfer the property to a blood relative to get into that exemption of the subdivision ordinance? So we agreed that I would pose the question to the designated legal counsel, and I asked Dwight who the designated legal counsel was, and he said, put it to MMA and see if they can answer the question. So I sent the MMA 3 questions. So that's the Maine Municipal Association. 3 questions, one of which was the LLC parcel, and they responded. Before I was going to share my screen. Raise your hand if you've had a chance to look at that document. Okay. All right. I'm going to put it up on the screen really fast. And so I can't really see you. So if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. So I put it up on the screen, and this is the response from the MMA. So I posed the question, assume that an LLC owns a parcel of property. It's divided 2 times within 5 years. One of the sales, and sales really should be transfer. It wasn't relative to the answer. Is to a relative who's of the primary member of the LLC. The relative happens to be a member of the LLC as well. Under our subdivision ordinance, a transfer to a blood relative does not trigger a division. And I quote, that's a quote from the subdivision ordinance. And then the question is in the 3rd paragraph, for the purpose of a donor who is an LLC, can the transfer to a relative of the primary member of the LLC constitute a person related to the donor by blood, which would exempt them from the subdivision ordinance? And the different color response that starts with no is the MMA's response to the question. They say no. The definitions in this of the state subdivision law control. The state ordinance doesn't seem to track the definitions, but to the extent they're different, the town cannot create broader exceptions than the state law than the state law allows. It cannot say the situation is not a subdivision if the state law says it is. They give the site to the state subdivision, and then she says, in my opinion, an LLC cannot use the gift to a relative exemption because an LLC is not a person and has no relatives. An LLC is a corporate entity. So that's what.
Hey, David, can I
they
interject for a
said.
second? In that,
Yeah, of course. And
no, sorry, I
to
was
you,
just going to say I
Nicole.
can't take minutes on your screen. No, I was just saying I couldn't take minutes while you were screen sharing, so I was going to ask you to take it off, but you did. So thank you. That's all.
Oh, really? You can't take minutes when I screen share? Oh,
I
interesting.
couldn't
didn't
figure
know
out how to
that.
do it because it was all your screen, so I couldn't
Oh,
type.
interesting. Interesting. That's good to know. I'm starting to do that more and more. So I think it's helpful because if this is recorded, they can actually see that document in the recording. So
Totally agree. Maybe they can just pause it once you've shown it and we don't have to keep it up. for a long time. That's okay with folks?
No, it's perfect. I appreciate that. So, I was unaware of this. This was not an issue that I had focused on or had any real concern whatsoever. But now that it's been raised, I don't know what to do with it. Gary, Scott, board members, selectmen, what do we do? Joe, you have your hand up first.
Well, I'm recusing myself on one hand, but I would like to express the opinion that I noticed in that paragraph that we're talking about state law, not just town ordinance. And it would seem to me to make it even more difficult to just have an exception because we made a mistake.
Anybody else have thoughts of what to do next?
This is Wes. I think I had expressed to you email a little while ago that Scott's a stockholder of the LLC and Jane Dunlap is stockholder of the LLC. And since they are stockholders and can make decisions about what the LLC does, they also can exchange land as relatives. I would think that it's a little fuzzy, but that's a possibility.
I think this thing from the MMA makes it pretty darn clear that if the title transfers from the LLC to somebody else, they cannot use the blood relative exemption. So, I mean, look, like I said, I was not focused on this. Yeah, Jeff.
In the interest of keeping everything moving along, it seems that there's two choices, and I guess Gary can weigh in on this. One, maybe the simplest, is that we could quickly pull together a minor subdivision application. You know, let's just, speaking out of turn here, if things go as it could tonight, I imagine we'll get through Lee J's review letter. We'll be back in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the next meeting is, to kind of go over the final document. If at that time we could have a minor subdivision application submitted for you all to review. There's no development proposed on that lot. There's no stormwater. There's already road frontage. You know, it would seem like it would be a fairly straightforward application, potentially. You know, that's one option that we could certainly pull something together quickly for the next time. And the other option, obviously, is recombine the land. And I'll let Gary speak on that piece. But whatever's the easiest way forward. I know that they'd like to keep the campground area as defined as we currently have it without those 70 acres in it. I think there were some, private agreements and such about that land, and we're, anyway, I'll let Gary speak on that if he wants to, but.
I agree with what Jeff said. We've been trying to keep the campground defined on the acreage. We had the project site, everything. We approached the town, we did this division. It wasn't illegal, hidden, or anything like that. If it's wrong, I got a couple different avenues to work around it. We can transfer the land back to Scott. We can apply for a subdivision. Whatever is easy to keep the CUP application going with the campground, we're ready to do at this point. I have already spoke today with Jane Dunlap and the lawyers, and we're ready to sign the papers to sign the land back over to Scott.
To the LLC, yeah.
To the LLC. correct.
Nick, yeah, Nickel.
I was going to say the LLC, but then this is just truly a question because this is all subdivision stuff is a little bit new to me. So if the division happens, because it happened, if you reverse it by giving it back, does that negate that it occurred in the definition of creating a subdivision? I don't know. You get what I'm asking for being clear?
I do, but I mean, I think we could treat it as if it didn't happen because they'd be correcting a.
This is Wes. It would be probably titled as a violation. In order to correct a violation and make it right, you give it back. And therefore, you make the violation disappear.
Yeah, Gary.
I would prefer it not be called a violation because we didn't do it. We didn't sneak. We did it right over the table in front of everybody. We approached the town. So it's a misunderstanding. We were led in the wrong direction. We had the wrong facts. It's not a violation. We'll remedy it.
Yeah, nobody, I don't think there's any indication that the CEO is going to issue a violation notice or anything like that.
I would use the word violation, but it's more like as if it were, and that's how it would be treated, just to make it go away.
So do we just proceed tonight where there is no written violation, as it never happened, and we will remedy it down the road?
Well, I mean, I think the key is that you won't receive a conditional use permit with this in the way it stands today. So I would think you'd have to remedy it before you received a CUP. I'm prepared to continue to go forward with your application based on the assumption you're going to remedy it. If you don't, that causes a fairly major problem for the board.
We're going to remedy it.
No, I know. I mean,
If
that's
it's
what I'm
illegal,
saying.
we need the campground's our main goal.
Understood. I mean, you could do either transfer. You could undo either transfer, either to Jane or to the other person, whichever one is easier to undo. You would get it down below a three lot division. So any disagreement with going forward and continuing with the Nature's Wilderness discussion, predicated on the very clear instruction that they have to remedy this before any CUP would be issued? Any dissent on that going forward by the board? Nico, you gotta, yeah.
Can I just ask the question as I'm taking the minutes? I didn't mean to be dissenting. That's just when I raised my hand. So Gary, is it accurate for me to put in the minutes that you're saying the plan is to transfer at least one of those parcels back to the LLC? I just don't want to misrepresent what we said.
You're on mute, Gary.
If it's truly an illegal division, then yes, we have to do so. So yes, we will make it happen. Like I said, I've already spoke with Jane.
Well, the only reason I ask is
Yeah, I mean, I guess we won't be issuing a CUP until this is resolved. So if there's a desire to challenge what the MMA said, you guys can figure that out, but we're not going to issue a CUP until it's resolved, however it's resolved. And so you get it. I think you get what we're saying. So
yeah, no, we were misinformed. If it's a legal division, we'll take care of it. It's not a big deal.
Good. So with that, I believe we can proceed on to a continued discussion of the there was other issues on the MMA legal discussion, but those have to do with issues that are not related to the Nature's Wilderness CUP. So we can talk about those at towards the end of the meeting. So I'd like to continue on with the discussion of Lee J's proposed conditions. And specifically, we're looking at the document that's entitled Finding of Fact, Conclusions of Law. And we had progressed to page 9, and we were talking about park amenities and services. And we were talking about the difference between paying guests, registered guests, and that was O that we were talking about. So I'd like to move on to the sub I of the O, where it's talking about the amenities that will be provided to guests. I'm just going to continue to walk through these. Swimming, be taught by a certified instructor. Let's go through all the way to sub 4, and then if there's any questions. Archery range will be established in a suitable location, and when the range is open, a safety instructor will be on duty. Canoes and kayaks will be provided free for campers and invited guests. For live music. Any discussion of those 4 amenities that are listed? Yes, Bob. You're on mute, Bob.
It really doesn't say anything after live music. What's it saying? There will be or there won't be?
Gary, maybe you can describe what Gary or
Yep.
Jeff can describe what you guys are thinking about for live music.
Oh, just like a lot of other campgrounds, they have live bands once in a while. That's basically what we're proposing. You're just having a band once in a while up to the campground.
Joe, as a member of the public.
Are there any limitations going to be put on the live bands? Like, can they play till 4 in, or, how far away can they be heard? How loud are they going to be? I mean,
Gary, is there a particular a particular location that you're thinking of to use for the live band area?
It would be in the upper field, which is in the middle of the whole operation, which would be more of a buffer to quiet it down for everybody. And we're not looking to have big Woodstock like concerts or anything like that. It's just going to be a small band for our campers to enjoy. That's it.
David?
Anybody? Yes, Mr. Fricker.
Would we have other places in the CUP where we talk about noise and light and all those sorts of things, right?
So far, we have not run into any restrictions on noise, and I'm not sure if there's any clear restrictions on noise.
I thought that there were some standard conditions or conditions that were required for the CUP regarding light pollution and noise and other things like that.
Yeah, oftentimes we have all lights must be down and inward, but in terms of noise, I'm not aware of anything in this CUP that would restrict noise. Nickel.
Just as comparison, when I wasn't on the board at the time, but when you all reviewed the venue that my wife ran for a while, there was the board put a restriction on how late live music could be outside until a certain time. I think you all said at that point 11 p.m. for live music outdoors, just as a frame of reference. And then I think it had to move indoors, and then there was a limit on when live music had to end indoors. I think it was midnight. Those were conditions that I recall. I don't have those at my fingertips.
Yeah, I mean, I have concerns about amplified music. Well, I have 2 concerns. One is having music that's going to attract anybody besides the guests, the guests of the campground. And 2, having it amplified in terms of the noise level. And I don't know how to address those necessarily. I just see those as two problems. I mean, if it's not amplified, it can only be so loud. Once you amplify it, you can go all the way, up to a full-blown concert in that area. So, do we really want to have, Gary, you said Woodstock. I mean, that's Rock Row. There's other stuff.
That was sarcasm.
I
No,
don't think.
we're gonna.
No, and I'm not being mean. I'm not saying that was a problem. I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm afraid of is if we don't put any limitation on it in terms of the amount of noise it can make. In theory, you could have a full-blown concert there. And so what's a reasonable way to allow you to do what you're looking to do, which is to have a relatively small music for your guests and not be afraid that it's going to be, a full-blown Rock Row.
Put the 11 o'clock limitation on us. I'm fine with having it stop at 11 o'clock. That works. Just like the last CUP granted for them.
Nickel and then Josiah.
I was just thinking about too. I do like the idea of putting some kind of time of day on amplified music, but I'm also just raising the question, thinking about people who live nearby, and maybe there's a difference. Like, I'm not married to these times, but maybe it's 11 p.m. on a Friday and a Saturday, and it's 10 p.m. on weeknights or something like that. I wonder if there's a difference.
Josiah.
I was wondering how many days a week you might allow this. I mean, 7 days a week for June, July, August, September, till 11 o'clock at night. No, I understand, Gary. I'm just saying that would be excessive. What am I asking for? Maybe 4 times a month live music, no more than that. 3 times a month. What do you think is a fair amount, Gary?
It would be a weekend thing, a Friday or Saturday night thing anyway, so 4 or 5 times a month, fine.
This is Wes. Can I shed a little light on this?
Of course.
I played in bluegrass band 40 years ago, 1980, and one of our main gigs was to play at campgrounds. The owner of the campground would invite us, we did acoustical instruments or bands like us, solely to entertain their captive audience, the campers. In our case, the camp may have had 150, only 35 to 50 showed up because only 35 to 50 were interested in bluegrass music. So it's not blown out of proportion, and it's a captive audience, and it's controlled by the camp owners. That's my experience.
Hey, Wes, for the minutes, can you state again how many years ago you were in a bluegrass band?
40 years ago. 1979 to 1981.
Mr. Fricker.
So I have a couple of thoughts and questions. One is, when did the live music get added to the CUP? Because I would think that this is something that we would have discussed or that would have come up at the public hearing, but I don't recall any discussion about live music or noise or times or anything like that at the public hearing. So on one hand, I have a concern that the public has not been able to weigh in on the idea of live music. 2, there's another document here that I don't know its relevance or when we were going to go over it, but it's a potential conditions document. And in that potential conditions document, I think it might be potential conditions for Nature's Way. The fourth bullet point talks about the applicant shall provide a mass gathering plan, et cetera, et cetera. And when you put together a mass gathering plan and live music, you could have not just a semi-quiet band for evening entertainment for campers, which I attend at my archery rendezvous and stuff and wouldn't be a problem. But when you put together a mass gathering plan and live music, you could have a situation where it's decided that the campground is going to be a venue for a rock festival or a bluegrass festival or something like that, and that worries me a little bit in terms of the neighbors and the people of Baldwin.
Yeah, Gary.
Digressing, Matt, we're not asking for a event permit. We're asking for live music for the campground guests only. We're not asking for Rock Row. We're not asking to have the public come. It's a inter-campground music. That's it. It's not open to the public. We've never asked for that. It's
Okay.
inter-campground
All right.
music.
So how about these?
I think we need some commentary, explanation, clauses, what have you, after live music that really describes what the events are going to be, when they're going to be, and talks about the limitations on the frequency, the size, and things like that. That may be the best we can do since Baldwin doesn't have a noise ordinance that we can reference in terms of decibels or anything.
So what I would propose, I always like to propose and get struck down or get modified. I see 4, maybe 5 conditions in this particular area. The first one would be no live music after 11 o'clock. The second one being live music would be limited to Fridays and Saturdays. Maybe Sundays as well. That the events, the live music events would not be open to the public and would only be made available for campground guests. And we have to go back to that definitional issue, but the people who pay to get in. And then 3, that any amplified music would not unreasonably interfere with the peace and enjoyment of the neighboring properties. And that last one is the area that I think we need to work on. I don't know exactly how to make that work, but I think those 5 conditions allow you to do what you want to do, Gary, and make us feel a little bit more comfortable that it's not something that we're not, that you're not intending it to be. But I think those 5 conditions focus it on what you're trying to do and allow you to do what you want to do, but make us feel more comfortable that it's not Rock Row. So with those 5 proposals, can we discuss those 5 issues to see if those, or maybe there's 6, but whatever, discuss those about whether or not those sound good. Nicola, you had your hand up first.
Matt, my memory was different from yours, so I went back and looked at the minutes from February 27th at the public hearing, and we did discuss live music, and Gary described it exactly the same as he's describing it now, that it was
Oh,
going to
thank
be
you.
live music on the weekends.
That's good.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Joe and then Lee J.
Yeah, I wonder
Joe.
if you could, I wonder if you could limit the live music to 1 day a week. Doesn't
I'm
matter to
not sure
Gary,
that's
apparently.
reasonable. Yeah, I'm not sure that's reasonable, but I'm open to discussion. Do board members believe it should be limited to one night, or is the proposed 3 nights, 2 nights? Okay, so just Friday, Saturday? Okay, so the proposed 2 nights a week, is that?
Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but 2.
Oh, two nights a week, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. That seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with the weekend here, but I have a question for Lee J. Are you there, Lee J?
Yep, I'm waiting for the
Yeah.
question.
Thank you. So the Maine Department of Environmental Protection does seem to put out some ordinances or principles on noise and noise control. And, they have, information on sound pressure levels and dBA, decibels, and things like that. And I don't think it matters that Baldwin doesn't have a noise ordinance. If there is a state noise ordinance, it would take precedence, as we just saw earlier tonight in another area. And I would like to either get from MMA or from SNDPC, some information or some references on the acceptable noise levels in for that particular zoning, because the principles or the rules that the state has vary for industrial areas versus other areas and things like that. So I think that we should have some link or reference to that. I think that should be incorporated in the conditions for the live music.
Okay, there's a lot in there. So the DEP, through their site location development permitting process, does have certain noise standards, primarily pertaining to industrial uses, which you cited, like gravel pits, rock quarries, and more importantly, they really deal with intermittent uses like bang, bang, bang. They don't talk about continuous sound levels that much in their regulations. This application also does not get to the level of site location development permitting if they only build phase 1. So until they're allowed to expand and go further, they're not even going to get to the level of being within the DEP performance standards. Many towns have adopted noise ordinances at the town level. The bigger issue becomes is that, and I've dealt with it in another community, where there's lots of music late at night. And, the issue becomes is when there's a complaint, it's going to be a phone call to Wes, and it's going to be you need to go out and take a sound meter and prove that they are not meeting whatever sound decibels are that you've adopted, or if there's anything that you can incorporate from like the DEP. I mean, I can carry over as a condition of approval certain decibel levels that other towns have adopted, so that they're not meeting them beyond the property line. I don't know this property all that well, but if it's in this field in the middle of the 400 acres, just a gut feeling, and I shouldn't really live on that, but they're not going to trip any decibel readings that would even get to that, because you're talking about usually 50 or 60 dB at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
But you can
that was a
condition them
great
on it.
answer. Yeah, that was a great answer, Lee J. And my recommendation to the town and the board and to Wes is that we get out ahead of this, so that, the situation you just described, let's say we don't say anything about noise or decibel levels or anything like that in the CUP. And then, on a Friday night or a Saturday night, we have a band and things like that. And then some neighbors call Wes and complain. And Wes is going to be, he's going to say, well, the town doesn't really have a sound ordinance and blah, blah, blah. And if we get out ahead of this and we give Gary the conditions and the rules, we're doing the campground and the town a favor, because then Gary's in a position and Wes is in a position to tell those people, look, Nature's Wilderness is within all of the parameters that we have laid out for them. And, we can solve a problem before it becomes one.
So, as you look to formulate, formulate conditions of approval, or even statements, if you come to some agreement on the live music piece within the applicant's proposal, the typical standard from another community that I have, my ordinances here, they have business districts and they have other districts. My gut tells me this would come under other districts if you're looking at multiple zoning areas. The decibel level cannot be above 67 decibels at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. So just as a matter of reference, 60 decibels is an office interior or ordinary conversation. 70 decibels is a vacuum cleaner at 10 feet.
Yep.
So
So to move this forward, very productive conversation. It sounds like the first four elements of my kind of tossing it out there in terms of parameters or conditions around live music were acceptable. And then the fifth one, with regard to unreasonably interfering with other property owners' peace and enjoyment of their property, we could put in parentheses not to exceed 67 decibels at the property line after 10 o'clock. And that gives us some contours to it. And let's put that down as proposed conditions. And let's think about those. So Lee J is going to give us back a document with the revisions that we've been talking about in it. Let's put that in as our touchstone. And if anybody has issues with it, that's one of the places we can come back to and say, this does or does not work with the overall application.
So let me just expand that a little bit. What I'm gonna do as part of that is I'm gonna put the same statement in this section that we're talking about where it says live music, and then add it as a condition of approval. I don't think you need, 4, 5, or 6 separate conditions. I think I can incorporate, as I've done elsewhere, I can incorporate all of those standards into one statement under
Okay,
live music.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it's just getting all the concepts down. I just want to keep,
Yep.
I guess my biggest, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. So, so seeing nobody, no dissension, going back to,
I think we're on the right track.
Can I just put a piece of information out there?
yes.
I just got curious because I'm guessing the town doesn't own a decibel reader. So I was just looking quickly, what do they cost? And it looks like a decent one is going to cost between $400 and $500, whatever that.
Next year's budget.
It's only 20% of the planning board's overall budget.
Ask the applicant to buy it.
Yeah, and that may end up to be part of the request from the applicant, but the concern there is that we actually would use that in many areas. So Selectmen, that's something for you to think about, whether or not that's an expense that the town can justify separate and apart from the applicant. But let's come back to that when we think about the conditions further. I'm sorry, my PDF closed on me, so I have to get back to. So swimming, archery, canoes, kayaks, everybody was fine with the statements after those, no additional discussion. Good, good. No ATVs will not be rented to campers. And Gary, just to be clear, ATVs is a general word for all forms of motorized vehicles. Yes. He's
Yes.
nodding yes. Okay. So P, multi-purpose room, multi-purpose building, sorry. The multi-purpose building will function as a community center, general store, restaurant, be open to campers and registered guests between the hours of 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Campground intends to sell retail goods from the general store. No limitations on goods that are offered for sale or proposed. Restaurant will offer prepared and made to order food items for sale to campers and registered guests. Menu items are expected to include breakfast, lunch, dinner. Applicant reserved the right to change menus as they see fit. The building will also contain games, TVs, and indoor recreation activities. So again, we're not talking about, the public is not able to go to use the multi-purpose building, correct?
Correct. It's campground use only.
So somebody in the neighborhood can't have a birthday party there. Can a camper have a birthday party where they invite people to come in to have a birthday party with people who are not
That would make them a guest, and that's normal procedure. They do have, like, if a grandparents have a birthday party, want to bring a couple grandkids in, that's fine. Normal procedure.
Any discussion amongst the board on this particular issue? Nicola, you have your hand up.
I was just curious. I remember us talking about this a bunch of times and the purposes of this building, and I also remember going in it and seeing how beautiful it was. Gary, I was just curious, what, because you're serving food and stuff, what does the state require of you as a campground? I think that might make us feel better about, how you're being regulated elsewhere.
That's our next step. When we're done with you guys, we need to go in front of the state fire marshal. We have to meet all their expectations and conditions as well. Right now, it's set up as a 35-seat or less cafe. So we have to meet the guidelines with.
Bob,
Will there be alcohol for sale or for serve?
If we get a liquor license, there will be cold beer. Yes, I wouldn't suggest hard liquor, but there may be beer if we do get a liquor license.
Nickel.
And Bob, we have actually suggested as a board that he have a liquor license, and Gary has said he doesn't want one, if I remember our conversations, because we were trying to encourage him to limit people leaving to get it.
Well, it's
This
a
is what-
possibility now.
This is Wes. I've dealt with liquor licenses in Cornish, and there's a difference between selling beer and wine and having a restaurant and serving alcohol. There's two completely different licenses. And so the easy one is just to retail sale beer and wine. And
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think we're good on the building. The hours seem reasonable, particularly if it's only for internal guests. Primitive sites prohibited. Nature's Campground will not contain any primitive sites. So that would be where somebody hikes into the woods and puts a tent up somewhere and can camp in the woods, primitive style. Okay. A conditional use may be granted by the planning board only in the event that the applicant has established to the satisfaction of the board the following. I'm just seeing
So-
how far this.
David, just as a point of interest for you, from that highlighted statement about a conditional use, all the way down through C comes right from your ordinance. It's a regurgitation of the ordinance to set up the next set of issues and standards that are going to be where the actual findings and performance standards are stated.
Perfect. I
So-
appreciate that.
Yeah, that whole thing comes directly from your ordinance.
All right, let's talk about it. Neither the proposed use nor the proposed site upon which the use will be located is of such a character that use will have significant adverse impact upon the value or quiet possession of surrounding properties greater than would normally occur from such use in the district. In reaching a determination on this standard, the planning board shall consider the size of the proposed use compared with the surrounding uses. So, I mean, unquestionably, this is a large, unusual use of land in that area. But under phase one, I don't see it as a shockingly different size use than other uses in the area. Just looking at phase one, which is what we're permitting at this point. Does anybody have a discussion point on that? The second one's the intensity of the proposed use, the amount of and type of traffic to be generated, hours of operation, expansive pavement, similar measures of intensity of use compared to surrounding uses. I think we've talked quite a bit about traffic, quite a bit about hours of operation. There's not a lot of any discussion on this one. Can everybody hear me? Nod if they can hear me. Okay.
Yes. So I just want to interject that all of these statements are setting up. If you look at your sheet down at the bottom, I believe like access to property. I don't know how you printed it off, but on mine, I put my statements, proposed statements for you in red. But those will all become the findings of fact, based on these things that they're saying above that you folks as the planning board need to consider as part of your review.
So should I jump down lower?
Well, you can. There's no reason, because these will all be somehow integrated into the findings, as part of it. There's this section down to access to property really doesn't require any kind of statements to be made.
Okay, so let's skip to cute dog and Matt Fricker's picture. So let's skip to access to property. Each property shall be provided with vehicular access to the property by abutting public or private ways or roads. Private right-of-ways shall be protected by permanent easements. And Lee J has added access will be by state aid,
Yep.
town ways. What's that mean, Lee J, state aid?
So state aid is the main routes where the state actually either maintains and or either maintains from a plowing standpoint or road reconstruction standpoint, any of the public way. So out on the main road, I can't remember the route number.
113.
113, thank you. That's a state aid road. Then
Okay.
town ways are public ways that the town maintains. And then of course, private ways are the road into the campground.
Okay. I think in here it should be stated that the access to the property should not be from the 113. Is it, how do you get in the backside there? Is it Brown Road? How do you? Yeah, that access to the campground shall not, public access to the campground shall not be via or through Brown Road, and the applicant shall actively discourage such use. And I think you're already doing that, Gary, so.
I am, and the road itself discourages the use, non-passable.
I noticed that Gary goes to work by going all the way around rather than the shorter distance that would take you there.
That's a tough road. It's a tough road. And the town, you know, I don't know who would post the signage, but somebody might want to post signage there saying early on the Brown Mountain Road, saying that this is not a throughway to nature's wilderness. I don't know who does that. Jeff or Lee J, maybe you have thoughts on who does that, but I am positive that the folks on the upper part of Brown Road do not want people turning around in their driveway more than once a year.
Well, if Brown is a town way, then it would be the town's responsibility to do that unless you're going to condition the applicant on providing the appropriate manual on uniform traffic control devices signage to indicate it is not a throughway.
Dwight, do you have any thoughts on that? Here, wait, Dwight, let me, whoops. It won't let me unmute you for some reason. All right. So
There it is.
what do you think about that, Dwight, the signage? You think that's something the town wants to do? Or should we ask the applicant to provide the town a sign of that nature?
I would think the applicant would come up with that.
All right, and the town will take care of getting it posted, because I think the town has a better ability to get signs posted than a private citizen does.
It'd be just like the sign they put for the mill entrance for Leamington Lumber, where it says not a mill entrance instead of going up the Brown Road. You do about the same thing right there.
Perfect. So Gary and Jeff, I think we would want you to provide the town a sign. I think it's a fairly minimal cost with maximum return. And if the town wants to post it, we recommend it. That's in Dwight's corner, not in ours. Any other issues with this particular area of access? This is, they have to provide access consistent with what has been discussed in the review plan in terms of the entrance to the gravel road and some other things that have been talked about. But in addition to those, anything else we need to worry about access? Okay. And just to highlight a couple of things that have come up, things like the no use of the road. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it. I don't want to say the wrong name. Marston's Way, Marston's Pond Road. That shouldn't be. People shouldn't park there. There shouldn't be people coming in or leaving. They should not be backed up onto that road. That, you need to make sure you have procedures in place that if you have a rush of people, they can come onto the property and not be backed up onto that road. And the no parking is a huge one. We can't have people parking on that road. And while you can't necessarily enforce that with the general public, you can with your guests. So if all right. So access to property, access limitations, any lot created after the effective date of the ordinance. I don't see any problems with the frontage or anything like that. Nobody else does. Dust, fumes, vapors, gases. Yeah, just a second here. Let me mute Dwight. Applicant shall be responsible for watering Marston's Road during dry spells in order to keep dust at a minimum for abutting residential properties. And generally speaking, that the dust emissions should not be leaving the property. So if you have a bike trail at the edge of your property line, that if that's creating dust and it's going on the adjoining property, that's a prohibited use. You have to move it away from the edge of the line if that's happening. Nickel.
Maybe this is a non-issue, but I'm just struck by the term dry spell. Seems like a really vague definition in that it seems like we need to limit the applicant in some other way to say you're not watering during the dry spell, right? It seems like you could argue whether it's a dry spell or not, like there's no definition. I kind of like what you were saying about dust leaving the property making sense. I guess, Lee J, is that typical language? It just seems a little weak from an enforcement standpoint.
No, I mean, that's a good point. When I was putting these together, I too struggled with that, and the only thing I could come up with was anything, dry spell. I mean, I don't, unless you want them to water daily, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure to what level or at what point do you require it, other than, the road's going to get very dry. Anybody coming through there is going to be kicking up dust, so you want them to at least get out there and water it. It's a tough one to come up with when they shall do it, but it's the best I could do. Sorry.
Yeah,
maybe
Gary.
common sense will prevail, and we want to keep our neighbors happy. We want to keep our campers happy. So we're going to do the right thing. You know, if we got unhappy neighbors, it's not going to be a good thing. We're going to water the park. We have the apparatus to do it. It's not a big deal.
So why don't we just strike the during the dry spells and just say the applicant shall be responsible for watering the Marston Road in order to keep dust at a minimum for abutting residential properties. All right. Glare, no land use or establishment shall be permitted to produce stray, dazzling lights or reflection of that light beyond its lot lines onto neighboring properties or onto any public way as to impair the vision of the driver of any vehicle upon that way. This use is contained within a, it's actually not 700, is it? How large is the entire property? Jeff?
I'd have to look.
So circle
Yeah, I
that.
forgot I thought we had 430 acres last time we had settled on, but you know, I think VJ has that number.
Yeah.
I have it somewhere in here,
we
yes.
Yeah, we talked about it at the last meeting and just add 70 onto it because it's plus
Right.
70 now.
Right. Yep.
There'll be no glare impacting the abutting property owners. No personal fireworks shall be allowed at the campground. If the campground management chooses to do fireworks display, it'll provide a date of the proposed fireworks to the town fire department for the upcoming season. So why don't I just throw my thoughts out on this? It seems as though there should be a limitation on the fireworks displays. And it seems as though there should be a notice to the to the neighbors of the fireworks display. The neighbors have livestock and equestrian or horses, I guess. And I would think we'd want to do some notice of a fireworks display. But those are two issues that I see there. Discussion. Joe, you have your hand up.
I'm a little concerned with this being sort of open-ended, that fireworks can happen anytime, every night, all 6 months of the campground being opened. Again, you know, I asked for some definition of how many nights of live music. I mean, I wonder, you know, how many nights of fireworks. I also am concerned about fire. I mean, like any firework display in the course of the last 2 weeks would have been folly. And so, you know, putting something together with dates of a firework display over the course of a summer is kind of difficult. We don't know how much rain we're going to have.
Yeah,
You
Gary.
wouldn't want it during a dry spell, right?
So,
Gary.
well, I was just going to add, I'm sorry, Joe. I was going to add that, you know, the last sentence in here says that they must provide the dates that firework displays are proposed for the fire department. So there's some level of information that they need to provide to the town before they just go doing firework displays.
Will the abutting landowners know what those days are? I mean, do they get?
We could add that
Yeah,
abutting landowners must be notified prior to firework displays.
And can we limit the number of fireworks displays in the course of the summer?
Actually, let me turn it to Gary. Gary, what are your thoughts on this? Like, let's not talk about putting conditions on until we know what your expectations are. So maybe we can meet your expectations without too much difficulty. What are your thoughts on the amount of times that you want to do this, and you know, what does this look like? You're on mute. Sorry.
Obviously, we're not gonna be doing it all the time. We're in the dry spell, but had to. But I would say, because we gotta pick a date, we might have to ask for a little bit more. So maybe say once a week maximum. Or what are you guys thinking? I don't want to be locked in. So, we may say we want to have it July 4th and it's too dry, so we got to postpone it till the next month or the next week.
Yeah, no, I agree. Nickel.
I just don't know anything about when you do like a professional fireworks display. I assume fire danger is taken into consideration. Does anybody know that definitively?
There are times when the fire danger level is such that it would be prohibited. Bob, did you have a question?
Once a week seems like a lot. I mean, you had fireworks once a week. That would certainly overtake the issue about live music.
Yeah, Gary. Mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. We still can't hear you. I'm sorry. No. Yeah, you're hitting the button. Let me see if I can unmute you.
There's also a mute button on the bottom of your screen. You put your mouse over it as well. That the space bar doesn't work. There's a button. Lower left corner on mine.
Hey, how about here?
There you go. There you go. We can hear you now. Sorry.
Right. I'm not saying we're gonna have it every week because it costs a lot of money to have fireworks displays, but I'm just saying I don't want to be limited to once a month, because if it comes during a dry spell, we might not be able to have it that time. So I'm just saying once a week possibly. Once a month, whatever.
Yeah. Other discussion. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm supporting Bob's concern, that if the fireworks are once a week and then you get 2 days a week of live music, and I am in bed before 11. I try to be, but I might have to change my sleep schedule because of this. I just, again, a cutoff of a time for the fireworks display. I mean, that would be one nice thing. No live fireworks after whenever, 10 o'clock. And no more than, well, Gary was just saying he'd compromise on once a month, and I would love to see that.
Anybody else? Yeah, Nickel. And then Matt.
I was just looking at some state law around fireworks, because I'm correct. It says if we don't have a town municipal ordinance about fireworks, then it proceeds to state law. And it says that fireworks may be used between the hours of 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. except on the following dates, where they can be used from 9 a.m. to 12:30 a.m., which are July 4th, December 31st, and the weekends immediately before and after July 4th and December 31st. It just goes on and on. However, there is nothing about fire danger or saying that you can't and set them off in times of high fire danger. So I'm wondering if we need to either research this more or consider putting in a condition that when the fire danger is X, we don't want fireworks.
We will notify the fire department prior to every fireworks display. Whether it be one or multiple, we will communicate with the fire department before doing so.
Well, and that's part of the finding statement here that would be done. That right in the last one, it says if the campground management chooses to do firework displays, it must first be provided dates of proposed fireworks to the town/fire department for the upcoming season. And then I've added some
But
other.
for me, the
regarding
concern is
fire.
fire danger, right? You can tell us you plan to do it on such and such a date. What I'm saying is the state doesn't seem to have any law about the level of fire danger stopping you, right? So I guess I'm kind of asking the board, as we're concerned about fire in Baldwin, do we want to say that there's some kind of a condition about fire danger and launching of fireworks? Because just because we've told the fire department, nothing about that says that they can say you can't do it.
Matt Fricker, you had your hand up for quite a while.
So I have a suggestion for frequency, and I like the idea of once a month. Certainly once a week I don't think would be acceptable to the community, but I'd like to give Nature's Wilderness some flexibility with what they do. And so the campground is open from May to September. That's 5 months. And so I would suggest that there be a condition that limits the fireworks to 5 times during the season. That way, if they want to have fireworks the grand opening weekend and fireworks the weekend that they close, but then they want to do 3 sets of fireworks around the 4th of July, for campers that are there before or after, maybe the weekend before or the July 4th holiday and the weekend after, that would work because they have 5 fireworks, to use up. And it doesn't have to be once a month, but so there's a limitation, but it gives them some flexibility.
All right, so let me toss out 4 or 5 factors, and you guys can decide whether they make sense. First, maximum of 5 fireworks displays put on by the campground in any one season. Second, that they have to give at least 14 days notice to the fire department, the Baldwin Fire Department, and landowners within a quarter mile of the property. I think we could do it shorter than a quarter of a mile. I'm just trying to think of a distance. So if people have horses or livestock that they're close, that's pretty close, a quarter of a mile for a fireworks display. That they give 14 days notice to people within a quarter of a mile and the fire department. The fire department has the authority to say no to the request, and that they follow state law in terms of the times for the fireworks display.
Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I was having an issue with it. Is it possible to also add in that, and this is just a thought, but when they do the fireworks displays, it has to be hired by a professional instead of saying, Gary and Scott decide to go down to the fireworks store and buy $1,000 worth of fireworks and set them off themselves. Is that, was anybody's thoughts on that?
Well, let's start with Gary, because if that's what you intend to do, to have I don't know if there's a certification, but at least, professional people to do it. Was that your intent?
For a 4th of July or a big show, yes, but little small events, we can take care of that fine. I've priced out to have displays and it's very, very expensive.
So I guess we'd want to add something in that the fire department is that the fire department believes that the people doing it have the qualifications to put on the show safely. And if the fire department has concerns, they can stop the show. They can, I don't know how else to do it. Mr. Fricker.
Yeah, there is it's actually called a licensed pyrotechnician. And there is a licensure for that, certification for the use of, fireworks, pyrotechnics, blah, blah, blah. So there is a professional, if you want to specify that.
There is, but there's also legality. It's legal for the average Joe to just light off fireworks. It's not illegal. You don't need to have a license to do so.
Right.
Joe, then Bob.
Yeah, I wonder if this isn't something that actually the insurance company is going to take care of for us all, because if Nature's Wilderness sets off a fireworks display and burns down half the town, the insurance company will be liable for the damage. And they're going to tell Gary whether or not he can have it. Am I wrong? The insurance company won't tell you that?
I don't think they'd be liable. The town's not going to burn down. You're out there. You're pushing it.
So
It's just a small fireworks display, Joe. Stop.
So let's not digress the conversation. So did my proposals make sense, with the last issue being either requiring a licensed pyrotechnic to be on site, or requiring that the fire department approve the individuals overseeing it, and that they're qualified to do the display?
Could you require insurance?
Well, I think they would be insured. I mean, we're going to require them to have insurance to operate the facility. I'm sure there's requirements on the state to have insurance. So,
my guess is that covers a lot of the other things that you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does. I don't know if there's a particular insurance rider for pyrotechnic displays. Nicole.
I'm just curious, Lee J, have you seen this in other towns? I mean, I know fireworks have only been allowed in Maine for like 3 years. How are other towns wrestling with this, if campgrounds or places wanting to do fireworks? I mean, we're all kind of, I don't know if any of us have really addressed this before. I know I haven't.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Nicole. I have not had any direct involvement with that. Some towns have ordinances that say, that say you can only do fireworks at certain times and certain days of the year, and others just allow the state law to dictate. But I have not had any direct involvement, so I can't help you on that without doing a little more research.
Sure.
Do you know anything about this licensed pyrotechnician? Have you heard of other towns requiring that?
Oh, yes. Especially those guys make their money on 4th of July. I mean, any of the bigger communities that have large displays, you're required to have a licensed pyrotechnician on site. I mean, I would agree with Gary. I mean, you're talking to have one of them on site doing the level of display that they're required to be on site for. You're talking at least a minimum of $10,000 or $15,000 for that kind of an event.
It's $10,000 for a 30-minute event. But also, to need a licensed pyrotechnic, it depends on the size of the fireworks that you're using. Obviously, if you're using full-scale fireworks, you need to have a pyrotechnics license to even buy them. But the everyday consumer can walk in any fireworks store and buy small fireworks and have small displays. That's what I'm asking for. If we have a huge display that brings us to that level that we need the pyrotechnics, that's on ours. That's on us to do so.
Matt, you had your hand up.
So, fireworks in the woods are a cause for concern. But yet, I think that Nature's Wilderness should be able to do this. I mean, I've had some experiences here where we live where our neighbors every 4th of July would go out onto the island right by our house. Like, it wouldn't be any different than if you did it from a platform in the middle of the pond at Nature's Wilderness. And, you know, some of the rockets end up landing on our roof. You know, so it's a little worrisome. So what I would ask is that this is kind of a question and an assumption. And that is that our fire department, or somebody in our fire department, has some competence and capability with fireworks. And that I think a middle of the road solution, you know, to again provide flexibility to Nature's Wilderness and to not cause them undue expenditure pressure, would be that we don't just get them to notify the fire department, but the 5 times a year that they're going to do the fireworks there, that somebody from the fire department be there. They might be able to, you know, do that with a small donation or pay them for their time or something like that, but it's not going to be $10,000. But I would like to, you know, if the town were doing this, if the town were doing fireworks, I would assume that they would have the fire department there as a precaution and for safety and things like that. And if we're going to have more than a backyard home display of fireworks, which is what I think, you know, it would be pseudo-commercial for something at Nature's Wilderness, my suggestion is that they take the precaution of having the fire department there.
Gary?
I have no problem if we had a big display that triggers that to have the fire department, I'd have no problem with that. If we have the small backyard thing on a wet day or not a high fire season, I don't think we need the fire department. Notifying them, that would not be a problem at all. Having them on site, I don't see a need for that. On a big display, yes, I agree, we'll have the fire department on site.
Yeah, you know, Gary, I think, you know, that's reasonable. You know, when you submit your plan to the fire department and you tell them what they're going to do, I think we can depend on our fire department to say, well, you know, this plan looks okay, go ahead and do it. Or that they'll say, well, this is of a scale where it's close enough to a commercial display that we should be there. that works. I trust our fire department to do what's right to protect the community.
Wes, Wes would like to say something.
Wes.
Two things. Nature's Wilderness has a pumper fire truck in the first place, so they can cover themselves on small firework operations. And number two, perhaps a key would be when rangers evaluate that fire danger medium, fireworks are okay, but when fire danger is at a high rate, then fireworks are not allowed. That's my thought.
Nicole?
I was just going to suggest that maybe we invite Jason to a meeting to talk about this condition with us at some point in the near future. Because we're making a lot of let's hear what the fire department wants.
So let's kind of take as a given the 5 times a year, 14 days notice to people in the area, to a quarter mile plus the fire department, and let's leave open the concept of whether or not there, the safety aspect of it, of licensed pyrotechnic, fire department on site, and the fire department's involvement. Let's just put that as a placeholder and ask Jason to attend the next meeting to talk about what he thinks is appropriate for that. Does that sound fair, Joe?
Yeah, I really think the insurance inspector is going to have a lot more to say than we even know about. And they seem to run the world these days. When the insurance inspector comes around and talks to me, he tells me what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no, or you pay a huge premium. No, I get
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
I was going to say,
I'm
he
trying
just
to
ups
help
my premium.
Gary.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize it, but I'm trying to help him.
9.6, industrial odors. No land use or establishment shall be permitted to produce offensive or harmful odors perceptible beyond their lot lines, either at ground or habitable elevation. And the only thing I see here is the ATV, motorcycle, etc. That if we've got some bad exhaust, we could have some problems. And you just have to. It's not something we can really prepare for. You just have to be aware of. And if you get complaints, you're going to have to respond to those complaints. Yeah, Gary.
I talked to Wood and Herring too on the ATV information. We have to adhere to all state rules with ATVs. We don't fall into the private property thing. They have to be registered,
Oh, okay.
which they can go right online. They don't have to come to the town hall. They can do a weekend or a weekly or a daily registration right online. So
That's good. That's helpful.
and
Yeah.
which means we have to adhere to all state laws, meaning exhaust, everything else.
Cool. That's good.
Wasn't a warden going to come and educate everybody about what ATV laws were and so forth?
I asked Mr. Herron to come to the meeting via Zoom, and he goes, I'm lucky to be able to dial my phone. So he gave me the information to relay to you, and he said if you need it in an email form, he will do so. If you don't believe me, he will do that for me. He'll send you an email stating that we have to follow the rules, and he told me everything.
Well, it's now recorded for posterity, so. 9.7, off-street parking standards, applicability, new construction, expansion, change of use shall be provided off-street parking for their use. Based on the diagrams, I think we looked at it previously, it looked like there was sufficient parking. And this is something for the code enforcement officer too, that if there is inadequate parking, then the code enforcement officer is supposed to provide notice of that if it's as built and it doesn't provide sufficient parking. But the specs, the way it's designed, had sufficient parking. requirements, off-street parking, and there's some specific design elements. Lee J the plan has made accommodations for required parking spaces as noted above, even though eating and drinking establishment will not be open to the public. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Disposal, sewage disposal, any use which relies on soils for treatment of wastewater shall comply with the requirements of Maine State Plumbing Code. Discharge of wastewater other than to soil shall be in compliance with the DEP. And I believe that the applicant has provided the septic design of all the septic systems that they are proposing for the system. Lee J, that's right? Yeah. So, making sure they follow those is key.
Yes, during the last meeting, you had asked me to do two things. One was pertaining to septic systems and campgrounds. And I did contact Department of Health and Human Services, who oversees the soils suitability and septic system design standards. And there are specific requirements that the campground has to adhere to and has to be permitted to through the state, because all septic system designs go through the state. And so this too will have to go through the state for appropriate design and permitting.
Nicole, is that a hand raise or is that something else?
Sorry, I'm trying to help with a newborn next to me here at the same time.
Oh,
so no,
okay.
that was something. Sorry.
Soils and moving of earth. So I'd like to get through the next two provisions, and then we do need 15 minutes to handle the other business. 9.9, soils and earth moving. No person shall perform any act, use of land in a manner that would cause substantial or avoidable erosion, create a nuisance, alter water flow. And the Maine DEP is really overseeing this. They've been involved for quite a while with the remediation and the other things that were involved. So as of right now, you guys are in compliance with whatever DEP's needed you to do, and the remediation's all done. Yes, I see you both nodding, Jeff and Gary. Yes, okay. Storm water drainage. Stormwater systems shall be designed to minimize the volume and rate of outflow from the development, and the design of drainage facilities shall accommodate a minimum 25-year storm frequency. And again, they have gone through this with the DEP, and provided they build it as designed, it appeared to have all the requisite stormwater precautions. So I'd like to end at that section. As has been the case in many of these discussions, our progress has not been as far as I hope, but we have made progress. I think we made four or five pages tonight. This second set, these with the red, the sections where Lee J has added red, it seems to go quicker. So the next meeting, I am hopeful that we will finish this document, and I will put you on the agenda again for the next time. Yes, Gary.
Realistically, when do you see a possible vote on this pending conditions?
2 meetings.
Another month?
Yes.
Then we can get a vote after that.
No. I foresee the next meeting finishing the things that Lee J has provided. I foresee getting a revised version from Lee J prior to the second meeting in June, and being able to consider the conditions at the second meeting in June.
Yep, you had asked that I not make any changes to these findings until we get through them. So as soon as we're through them, which I'm assuming will be the next meeting, I can feverishly work to revise them based on all the stuff we've been discussing and get them back to you in, you know, in a day or two from that standpoint, so that you'll have clean sets to be able to potentially take a vote on.
Yeah, that's what I see. Jeff.
I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask this question. Would it be looking at the rest of stuff in red? We're talking about density, which is pretty clear, a non-applicable section, and setbacks. Would the board consider tabling us, listening to the next discussion for the next folks that have been waiting, and then we're probably 5 or 10 minutes away from getting to the conditions of approval, which, you know, so we're not far from saying, okay, Lee J, go ahead and write up everything that we've talked about, and then come back next time. You know, I think we're so close that it's tough to say, well, let's come back in 2 weeks, spend the 10 minutes, finish this up. You know, while we're happy to pause right now and let the good people that have been waiting since the beginning go. But, you know, if we could take that 10 minutes now while we're on a roll and it's fresh, you know, we certainly would appreciate that. You know, what's the board? I guess, what's your thought?
Sorry, we had some internal technical issues. I mean, I don't know if you're right, if it's 10 minutes or not. I just don't know. I mean, if you're right, I agree, let's plow through it, but I just don't know if you're right. We could take, I mean, if the board wants to, we could take up the other matters and spend another 10 or 15 minutes on this at the end. I defer to the board. If people have to go do stuff, I don't, you know, we tend to end at 9. So, so let's just take a straw poll. If you would like to return to this after doing the other business, please raise your hand.
Hey, I'm having a real hard time with the internet access tonight. It's real spotty. I'm hearing like every few words. I'm sorry, but that's on my end.
Is anybody else having that same problem? Okay. You shouldn't have cheaped out on that that internet connection, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
David,
pretty sure it's the
my
same one
internet's
you
fine,
have.
but I have I have another call at 9 o'clock that I have to take and get on. So,
All right.
but you'll
we're
still
just-
have
we're
a
just-
quorum because Bob's on.
I've got to go at 9 o'clock. I'm sorry. That's what I planned.
All right, we just wasted 5 talking about it, so let's just proceed.
All right. The other items on the agenda were review of the division ordinance, state and local changes. Bob and Joe were kind enough to take on this task, and if you remember, the question that I posed to the MMA was whether or not just putting it up quickly, I'll take it off in a second, Nickel. I asked the MMA on number 2, if Baldwin has a subdivision ordinance. It's not completely the same as the state statute, and in some places Baldwin's is more restrictive, other places it's not as restrictive. Which one are we supposed to follow? And the person from the MMA, the lawyer, said that the state law would control, and that that there's criteria that the state law has, that even if Baldwin's ordinance doesn't include them, that we have to follow it. And they say generally that if the town is more restrictive, then that would be what we apply. But if it's less restrictive, then we have to at least apply what the state law is. And so, so with that as kind of background, Bob actually essentially said the same thing to us last week, and he and Joe took on a overview of the comparison between the subdivision ordinance we have and state law, and prepared a document which has been provided to everybody. Do one of you guys want to kind of explain what that is?
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. We gave you 2 documents, and interestingly, I can't find them right in front of me. I'm sure they're here somewhere. But one was just, I printed out the definition section of the land use ordinance that we have in Baldwin, and interspersed within that various definitions that the state statute has, so that you could kind of see the comparison between the 2 clauses as they apply. And then Joe and I went through each one of those areas and made a comment as to where we thought the state was stricter than the town's ordinance. And it pretty much was just about everywhere. They either have a different definition or they have one that's a little more strict. And by strict, we mean it defines it more than what we do. And the bottom line is, it looks to us like we've got to do something with our ordinance. Now, MMA didn't, I know they said that we default to the state, but I'm not sure that that's totally true, because when we look at the state, it says we have the option of filing something with the Registry of Deeds that says what our ordinance says, and then we have until the first of the year. If we don't file with the state, then the state statute becomes the default. So I don't know if we could get our act in order. We haven't, I think, until the 30th of June to file with the Registry of Deeds. But it says here, such a municipality must file its conflicting definition in the County Registry of Deeds by 30 June 2020 for the definition to remain valid for the grace period ending January 1st, 2021. So I don't know. I read that, and then I hear what MMA says, where they say it automatically defaults to the state. So there's still like a lawyer's opinion, I guess. That's essentially it. I mean, and you look through the various documents, and there's things such as Joe mentioned that he didn't know what a dwelling was because it's kind of dubiously defined, and if what we say a dwelling unit is versus what the state says a dwelling unit is different. And also when we look at our own land use ordinance, I think, about dwellings, there seems to be some areas where we might want to look at, because we talk about dwelling units versus dwellings, and a dwelling is 600 feet or more, but we don't define that for a dwelling unit. When you actually look at the land use ordinance and the subdivision ordinance, we're generally talking about dwelling units. And there's different definitions for dwelling units between the state and our ordinance. So there's a lot of work, I think, to be done. I think the first thing, though, that the town should do is to figure out if we have a chance to use the grace period.
Yeah, what I did not like, but maybe I have to get used to, is the state wanted to predicate the definition of a dwelling unit on intent. If people dwelled there or they intended to dwell there, it was a dwelling unit. And I know Standish got kind of wrapped up about whether it had a kitchen or not, was how they were going at defining a dwelling unit. But the state wants to say, if they intend to sleep there, if they intend to live there, then it's a dwelling unit. Maybe in that case, where if we said it's got to have a kitchen to be a dwelling unit, it's it's more restrictive. I don't know. It was something that I saw causing us a lot of arguments into the future.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Even the term more restrictive is a bit of an issue for me anyway. I mean, because, and maybe I'm getting too far deep into it, but I went back and researched where this issue started with, and it started with a law that was passed in 2001, I think, that directed the state planning office to look at standardizing subdivision ordinances across the state. And one of the issues they wrestled with was home rule, and how much leeway does the local governments have in setting subdivision ordinances that differ from a standardized one. And the state said, yes, you do have at the local level the option to be stricter, but the term that they used in the study for being stricter had to do with looking at more subdivisions versus, definitions of what's a house or whatever. And it looked more like we had to have something in our land use ordinance or land use planning documents that would say, if you want to go into a rural area and be more restrictive there, you need to have something that says that's why you're doing it. I don't know, they say maybe as this law has been kicked around by the legislature several times over the years. It looks to me like 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years, each time giving the towns a little more time to come into line. And I'm just not sure what I would recommend, other than I would see if maybe I could talk to a lawyer. Maybe, MMA is giving you a pretty cut answer, right? But when I read the statute, I don't get that. And I mean, who might have questioned them, right? But I do.
So I guess we got to talk about path forward, what we want to do. I mean, there's clearly an issue, and it sounds like either we submit our subdivision ordinance to the Registry of Deeds to get that grace period, and we work towards figuring it out. So what do we just send the Registry of Deeds? Do we just send the Registry of Deeds a copy of our subdivision ordinance?
I don't think that would do it.
Do you think we have to specifically identify what is different?
I also wonder at what point we have to have a town meeting to direct what we do. I think we can not take action without a town meeting, but I wonder if we take action, whether we need a town meeting or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think if we took action to file with the Registry of Deeds to protect what we currently have, we're doing nothing other than continuing what has been voted on. But before we can change, in January 1st, we should have had an approved revised subdivision ordinance by the voters.
I recommend.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I recommend doing nothing and letting it take its course. And we end up with the state law, because we can end up with the state law one way or another. We end up with the state law, and at the same time, we look at it and see what we want to revise. And next spring's town meeting, we can revise if we want to.
It leaves a little question mark of the things that we review between now and the next town meeting. What exactly should we apply? Yeah, Nicole.
I think as much as it's a mealy-mouthed answer, I think we have to look at what we're looking at and take whichever one's more restrictive, either our ordinance or the state's, until we get a new subdivision ordinance passed by voters. Right?
Yeah, kind of piecemeal it through until next town meeting.
I think so, right? Because it's going to be this question of is it a parcel?
You disappeared on us, Nicole.
Sorry, my battery is about to die. I have to plug my computer in. Sorry.
What about putting this to the selectmen and saying, if we want to preserve our subdivision ordinance, they have to file something, and they have to make the decision to file something with the Registry of Deeds.
I think this is our decision, David.
Bob, yeah.
I would just say, if you look at the statute, it says if you don't file with the state or with the Registry of Deeds by 30 June this year, then we automatically default to the state definitions. And we don't get the value of the grace period.
Well, let's do this, because I'm not getting the sense that we really have a clear path of what we want to do. Why don't we, talk amongst our, not amongst ourselves, but I mean, with, think about this, and at the next meeting, let's talk about it again and decide a course of action. We'll have time to file something before June 30th. And I think really the question is, do we file to preserve what we have, or do we not file? And if we do file, what do we file? But that's really a secondary concern. We can get that together relatively quickly based on what you guys have done already. It's just whether or not we're going to file. So why don't we just think about that, not answer that question right now, because I'm not getting the sense that anybody really has a thoughtful response to it.
This is Wes. A question to Bob. in the default by June 30th. Is that final, or does it roll over and we have another chance next year, June 30th of 2021, to file?
The legislature can do anything, I guess. But right now, the statute says June 30th of this year is the deadline.
Okay, let's table that for the next meeting, because I just want to get in this last part. I think Ted may have been waiting for this. So the last thing that we have before we adjourn, and this is a little bit complex, but I think it's actually a positive answer for Ted. I'm going to put this up on the screen. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to put it on the screen so folks can see it. Okay, so I asked the question to the MMA that I made up some of the facts because the size isn't that relevant. But you basically have a big lot, you divide it 3 ways. The middle, it's like a Neapolitan ice cream where you have different colors. In the middle, which is usually strawberry, is the sale to the abutter, which doesn't trigger the subdivision ordinance. But then one of the side lots, the person wants to divide that further. And so how does the subdivision ordinance apply to that? My thought originally was it applied to the entire mother lot, and that you had to have a subdivision that took into consideration all the property within the mother lot. And what the MMA said, and I'm going to take this off in just 2 seconds. What the MMA said was that the subdivision the board would consider the 2 other parcels for the purpose of the separation of the 3rd parcel, but it wouldn't be taken into consideration when actually providing the subdivision restrictions. There's more. Here's a little bit more. Sorry, of the answer from the MMA. I sent this out to everybody on the board. For those of you who didn't see it, it's also on the Baldwin website for today's meeting, but you can pause the screen and read that at your convenience. But what I took from that overall discussion was that if in this case Rise and Shine wants to have a subdivision on lot C, which is the farthest west of the 3-lot division, that the subdivision proposal would only apply to lot C. We would take into consideration the other 2 parcels, but they wouldn't be subject to the subdivision restrictions in the same way. So yeah, discussion, Joe.
So I read that a number of times, and I think I understood that it also allows parcel A to submit a subdivision application separate from parcel C.
Yeah, they could have the original mother lot remaining parcel could have a subdivision separate and apart from C's subdivision proposal.
But B could not, because that was predicated on it being a sale to a neighbor.
B could not redivide that within 5 years. That was my understanding.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think we have to read this a few times. It's pretty dense. Dense is in the sense of packed with information, not in the sense of lacking intelligence. But I think what it does is it allows Ted to do what I think he's trying to do, and submit the subdivision proposal for his his parcel that he owns and dividing it into two parcels. That's not to say, you know, that we're passing, you know, that we're saying A-OK on the application, but just procedurally, he's doing what's appropriate, and we can entertain that application. So Ted, if you want to look at the Baldwin website and take a look at that answer, that may or may not help you understand what we're doing, but definitely, I think it gives me comfort that we're able to consider your application for what's lot C on the question, but is really, I don't know what you call that lot, but whatever you own, the Rise and Shine owns. So any questions on that? And we could talk about that again to next meeting. I just wanted to get that out there. Just for the board's general understanding, there's an individual named James McDonald who is going to come before us with a minor subdivision ordinance application for the parcel across from the town of Baldwin's, from the old school, from the office. He's looking to lease out the property for a solar farm, but there's some complexities on the ownership and the configuration of that parcel. So he needs to come in to do a minor subdivision because of the way, some intricacies of how that property is. I don't really want to get into it at 9:15, but just know that he's coming in. He submitted a letter to me basically just saying, I'm going to do this, just give you a heads up. Rise and Shine is part of that as well. But we can get into that more. I'll give you the information that he gave me for the next meeting. I just got it this morning, so I wasn't going to put him on the agenda for discussion today. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. I think that's all we can deal with today. Matt, thank you. Matt Fricker, thank you for staying on a little bit longer.
Just one little comment, Wes.
Yes.
To Nichols, when you were talking about Ted's subdivision, you referenced it as Rise and Shine. Ted's his company is Water's Edge.
That's right. My apologies.
Just to let Nichols.
I just thought Ted was a magnet. He just had all these corporate. Yeah, Water's Edge. Water's Edge is the one the one we were talking about. Rise and Shine is the other one. So, all right. Anything else we can deal with today?
Nope, we did well. You covered a lot.
Thank you, David. You did a very nice job.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Unanimous. Gentlemen, and if there were any ladies on the phone,
Thank you, David.
so much.
Good job.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.